Okay, just going through this increasing, decreasing. So for here, when is this graph increasing or decreasing? So this graph right here, and we're gonna imagine that there are arrows at the ends, this is always increasing. So it's increasing from negative infinity to positive infinity. That's it. Okay, it's not decreasing at all. It goes up, it kind of stops for a second here, but really doesn't, and keeps going. So that would be it for that one. Intervals of decreasing, well, this graph never goes down. It is always going up. The y values are always going up, so this would be none. Number 3, identify the domain. So it keeps going to the left. That's going to be negative infinity. It continues going to the right. That's positive infinity. My x values can be anything. My x value could be -5, -4, -3, -2, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. So identify the range for this one. My graph continues down. It keeps going down and keeps going from here and goes up. There's no breaks in the graph, and so this one is also going to be from negative infinity to positive infinity. Number 5, oh, I have 2 of these. I'm going to have to delete that one. I'm sorry. So I'll do that in post. For the graph, I do intervals of increasing. When I look at this graph right here, it's a square root function. It was not increasing at all, so we're going to put none. Number 7, when is it decreasing? So, well, I look at my x value. So like I said, I keep putting this here. So when does it start decreasing? It starts to decrease at 3. And then remember that there are arrows. And so it's going to be 3 to infinity. We have a point at 3. The only time you don't put closed parentheses is if there's an asymptote. This one doesn't have an asymptote. It just starts at 3 and keeps going. It continues to decrease from there on out. And only use the x values for decreasing. Identify the domain. Domain is very similar. My graph starts at -3 and keeps going to the right. So it's going to be from -3 to infinity. Identify the range. The range is a little bit trickier. My graph keeps going down. Okay, I have an arrow down. I always start with that arrow down. So it goes from negative infinity, and then my graph stops right here. Okay, what's my y value when it stops? It is 0. So my range is going to be from negative infinity to 0. Intervals in which the graph is increasing. So for this one here, it is increasing from here to here. So it's increasing from, so I put my little number line down here. Okay. And my graph kind of does something funky at -1. It is increasing. It's increasing from negative infinity, stops increasing at or it doesn't stop increasing. It just kind of gets closer to -1 and keeps going, but actually never touches -1. So from negative infinity to -1, it's increasing. Then it starts increasing from -1 and continues on to positive infinity for this part of the graph. So it's going to be negative infinity to -1 and -1 to positive infinity. This one, my graph never decreases, so this would be none. Identify the domain. Domain is going to be the same thing. It's going to go from negative infinity, and then my x values stop for a minute, kind of a gap there at -1. And then from starts back up again. My graph starts up again at -1, goes to infinity. My graph has 2 parts, so the domain is going to have 2 parts. Identify the range. So my range, first thing I look at, does my graph keep going down? Yes, it goes from negative infinity. My range is in 2 parts, so I have this part here, and then I have this part here. Well, these parts kind of split at 2. Okay, so my graph goes from negative infinity, stops at 2, this part, and then the other part starts up again at 2 and goes to positive infinity. increasing, decreasing for this one. This is always increasing. It's increasing from negative infinity to positive infinity. So it just keeps increasing. This one right here, it does not decrease, so we write none. Identify the domain. We're imagining that it has arrows on the end, and so my domain, well, it goes to the left infinitely, negative infinity, and then goes to positive infinity to the right. The range, my graph actually doesn't go down, it actually doesn't, it kind of stops at what looks like -3. So my graph stops at -3, but actually never touches, and then it just keeps going up. Okay, so it starts out at -3 and keeps going, but it actually never touches -3, which is why we have that open parentheses. Increasing, so my graph here, it's increasing from here to here. So if I were reading this like a chart, it would go from negative infinity, and it would stop increasing at -2. Okay, and it's closed because it stops at that point. The graph is decreasing. Again, put my little number line down here. This is the part of the graph I'm talking about. So I'm just kind of reading it from the bottom, and so it would be from -2 to positive infinity. Domain. My domain, because we're going to imagine this as arrows, well, it has an arrow to the left, that's negative infinity, an arrow to the right, that's positive infinity. And range for this one. Okay, so first thing I look at is I look at my graph is going down. Okay, where my graph stops. It goes from negative infinity. My graph stops right here. What's the y value where it stops? It stops at 4, and it's closed because there's a point there.